Tutbury Castle's pretty famous in the ghost world, people interested in paranormal investigation. And that's because it's got a very long history of ghosts that have been talked about for a long, long time. I mean, and ghosts have been part of our culture for a long, long time. I mean, Shakespeare writes about it in Hamlet. Of course, we have fairies that the Tudors viewed as dangerous, in fact, in Midsummer Night's Dream. This idea of places that have had particularly strong events happening, almost like making a record, you know, impregnated within the very walls. And this castle's seen blood and siege and thunder. We've had some terrible periods of time of great brutality and darkness, but also periods of time where people lived and loved and had their babies for hundreds of years, kings and queens visiting, staying. And so that's why this place is, oh, it must be something, it's going to be ghosts, it'll be there.
A ghost, in my opinion, is an energy that has not left the earth plane. So spirit is a entity that has gone on to the next realm, into the spirit realm. A ghost is an energy or an entity that has remained on the earth plane. So that's why we will have stories of a ghost that is causing lights to be switched on and off, or doors opening and closing, because generally a ghost is someone that is unhappy and has also passed quite traumatically. Car accident, a fire, a murder. So they stay stuck between this world and the next. A spirit is when we are released from our physical body, our spirit rises up to the light, we move into the spirit world, and we're joined by our loved ones. Generally, when we go, those loved ones come to connect with us, to collect us, so to speak. A poltergeist is an energy, an entity that tends to be very negative and may have controllers controlling it. So they're not really in control themselves, but they're controlled by something else, usually a master of some sort that's causing them to create havoc around a person or within an establishment or within a home.
We were able to prove with the dig, with the British Museum and Birmingham University, that in fact Romans were here. We know the Vikings came past, I mean, not just in a few ships with a dragon's head, hundreds of ships on the way through to Repton. So this endless kind of idea of humanity being on this green table on top of a hill. And the reason it's very important is because we've got 2 Roman roads near here. Now that gives you access to moving your war engines, your goods, people. Most of us were in a rural community, even in the Tudor period, I mean, yes. And so consequently, a chance to move things around and trade. That's why rivers are equally as important. And we have both here. So it's a very important central spot. And about 4 miles down the road is a place where it's the furthest from anywhere else in England from the sea. So we're pretty far away as well. So welcome to the King's bedroom at Tutbury Castle. It's a very small room, isn't it? But it's called that because Charles I and Prince Rupert used this as a withdrawing room as the Civil War was building and building, and would cost the castle its life, really, because it was largely destroyed in the Civil War. Now, there's something about this room, and we can't really pin it down. We've had psychologists in here, psychiatrists in here, we've had weather experts, some of the top experts, and they don't understand why this room has such an odd energy to it. We've had people faint in here, so I have to be very careful about people, but also people say they feel that by coming in here, they're going to somewhere else. They can't describe it. What's impressive is the folks who think that there's no such thing as ghosts or no such thing as that, and then have very much affected by the room. The way it shows itself is feeling like there's a swimming cap on you, can be that, like you're falling forward. The room's quite uneven in terms of floor and walls. It's fair enough to say the room's uneven, but actually it's not that that's particularly affecting people, I understand. In here are my costumes. I play all these characters, Catherine of Aragon, Mary Queen of Scots behind me, and others. But I want to know why such a small space should have such an amazing impact on so many people. Now, since the internet, of course, there's a problem there. It can be a damaging effect because people think they're having it because they've seen someone else has. But I can tell you for 10, 13, 14 years, people were experiencing things here and they were often the same, and yet some of them from all over the world, they were able to say, there's a child in here darting. I've just seen a child. And lots of feelings of presence in the room. Lower back pain. Some people say there was a rape in here and that's why it's lower back pain, but you know what? Let's have a bit of evidence. All I know is I've had people run out of here. I've had people who were very hardened run out of here. I've had soldiers weep in here, and I know that the atmosphere at times is so charged, my staff won't come in. It doesn't mean it's evil, but it's something we can't get a grip on. And while I'm speaking to you now, the temperature has dropped pretty dramatically.
Keep looking.
And the idea of people going ghost hunting as an interest in life has had a revival, there's no question about it, of late. But we must remember with the founding of the spiritualist movement towards the end of the 19th century, in two massive wars, between the wars particularly, there was a great deal of interest in seances and table tipping and this sort of thing. Well, there have been plenty of it, of course, in the Victorian period too. And we talk about being mesmerised. This was the start of real interest. And Mesmer was a real man living in Switzerland, and he lived and earned his money on considering how hypnosis might help people think differently or be part of healing. So that in its turn also plugging in, if you like, to our spirituality, and this castle plugs into a lot of people's spirituality.
Adrenaline is a very physical thing. That shock and that, the fright, that's just their way of enjoying themselves. That's a very physical thing.
A very large number of people are aware that Mary Queen of Scots was a prisoner here and are very interested in that, of course. She was a tremendous, glamorous, tragic figure in our history. And indeed that the castle was owned by Elizabeth I, going right the way back to 1199. The castle had been owned by the monarch, and still is, I should say. But what's so interesting about the Mary Queen of Scots and Elizabeth idea is Elizabeth was actually due to visit here in 1571, but Mary had already been, so she sort of called off. I don't think I want to breathe the same air. Mary was prisoner here for the very first time on the 2nd of February 1569. Before that time, having escaped from Scotland, Mary Stuart had been in Carlisle, where she crossed over, in a boat and was there for a while. Then she travelled down to England, and all that time she was under house keep, because Elizabeth was taking the pulse of every royal house of Europe with her ambassadors, and the quotes were, "We have the Scotch Queen. Do you want her?" But apparently not. So when Mary came here on the 2nd of February 1569, she was told, and this castle was absolutely vast and full of streets and crowded and horses moving around, all these things going on, she was told she was now a prisoner. And of course, she was being questioned about the death of her second husband, Darnley, who was a really horrible man, actually. That doesn't mean he's entitled to be murdered, or entitled to murder him, rather. But what it does mean is that she had some answering to do, because he was very, very close to the English throne in succession. And he was, no doubt about it, murdered. Many people believed she was colluded with her third husband, Bothwell. So when she came here, she had two dead husbands, second murdered. First husband, Francois, France, the Dauphin, died young, at 17 years of age. And then she marries Darnley. And Elizabeth must have laughed when she married him, because she's reported to have saying, "Oh, don't marry her." So she sends a beautiful young man in line to the English throne, because she knew his morals were in the gutter. His behaviour was generally appalling, and the lairds of Scotland were disgusted this man had come amongst them. And the sovereignty being looked after by a child, a minority sovereignty as it's called, had gone on in Scotland since the early to mid 1400s, right the way through it. And Mary herself had been as well, a child of 6 days old when she came to the throne. So there was all this stuff going on in the background. So when she arrived here, there were these murders and death associated with her, and on top of that, she'd been locked up in Scotland. She'd escaped. There'd been the Battle of Langside, and she had escaped into England. Her third husband by then was going mad in a jail in Denmark. He was chained to a concrete post going round and round like a dog. And he was extremely attractive and a cousin. And in there lies a lot of the problem. So there's that. She'd left behind her son, James, who she'd signed over to for the regency of her bastard half-brother Murray. He'd been after it for a long time. And she'd lost her son, her kingdom, and her dignity. Because at this point, she is being shown on leaflets as a crowned mermaid, which is a prostitute. And the running hair at the bottom, which is the symbol of Bothwell. It must have been absolutely terrifying for her to come here and be told this. In fact, it was so terrifying that she vomited black blood, sign of an ulcer, collapsed across the neck of the horse, was held down, they made her walk in here. All this had happened, and she wasn't even 27. So you can see why some of the courts of Europe might have been a bit concerned about the choices that she'd made. And in fact, she historically, we have much record of her saying, my heart is my own. Well, it isn't. She's not a shepherdess running through a field. Her heart and her womb belong to her people, and the decisions she makes should be for the purposes of trade and peace, for the nation's sake. And of course, Elizabeth was going to be a master and mistress in her own kingdom, wasn't she? That's a famous quote of hers. And Elizabeth had her locked up for nearly 19 years, so she was here 4 times in total, the last time for 11 months. And then the Babington plot happened and she went from here. And she didn't know that all was known. She didn't know that one of her closest associates was a double agent. And all of these things meant that this is a woman who was constantly confronted by betrayal.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think that the dogma of religion is something that society no longer believes in. Religion hundreds of years ago was to keep control over people, in a sense. And we are so free now with our broad-mindedness. We don't need that kind of institution. However, I think that obviously I'm spiritual, and religion plays a part in that, in the sense that when I do my work, I call upon the archangels. I call upon Archangel Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, Sandalphon, Metatron, all these different angels, because they hold an energy. So there is the beauty in religion, not just the rules of religion.
Now, the ghostly side of her is very interesting here, because people who serve in the British Army or in the armed forces are the ones who are most likely to claim they've seen her or don't know what they're seeing. And we had a mass sighting about 20 years ago when we had a very large group of army come here who'd been in the army, and then they'd formed a historical army group. I'm quite, you'd think they'd had enough of it really, but and they told me how marvellous it was when I'd appeared in the middle of the night in the white gown on top of the North Tower and frightened the hell out of them, and how they'd all enjoyed it, and I wasn't here, and I haven't got a white gown, and the tower was locked up. And interestingly, you can sometimes get people get quite nasty and go, oh, come on, joke over. We know it was you. I said, it most certainly wasn't me. I was in bed. And that's interesting. We've had a Marine who saw Mary crossing at speed across the gardens in good sunshine, actually, in an afternoon. The ghosts here are not necessarily come when it's wet and windy. We get quite a lot of them in the daylight as well on sunny days. And people just think there's a bloke in armour walking about. They think it's a real actor. We've had that twice. And they're not even thinking it's a ghost, and I tend to not disabuse them of that just in case they don't come back. Some people get married with us at midnight instead of having reception. They have a ghost hunt. The interest is phenomenal, really, but the castle has got some very interesting stories associated with it. If you're here, Your Grace, you're welcome.
So ghosts interact with people in the sense that if you are sensitive enough, you will know the ghost is there. You will see, you may see flash of darkness or a flash of light across the room. You know, obviously if you're sensitive enough and open and empathic, you'll get that feeling of, oh, there's a frequency in here that makes me feel very cold. Or when they're loving spirit and good spirit, you can actually feel heat, a lot of heat. A ghost is some energy that still has a residual significance within the place or the property. And so that's how they remain in that place, because they're either attached or the person living in that property is still attached to them. For example, a wife whose husband died and she's so longing for that husband to be with her that she's holding his energy. So the ghost of him is still wandering around, still sits on the bed with her at night, and she can feel, you know, there's at sea, even an indentation in the bed, or a ringing of the doorbell, or even tapping noises, which is often spirit wanting to get your attention. So a ghost can be, actually, I think the word ghost is, you know, for me, it's all spirit. It's all spirit at the end of the day, just that you have negative and you have positive. A residual evidence is what a ghost is, but the ghost is usually that of a lower frequency. And I think of spirit is something that is beautiful and loving.
The most predominant sighting or feeling that people have here, and very often nothing to do with a ghost hunt, you know, just in an afternoon, was after the staircase in this room of the Great Hall was found, which was in January 2000, on the 27th of January. I'd had an airing cupboard removed in the lower floor, and the back wall caved in, and there were the stairs. I mean, it was remarkable. And they're not very old, they're about 1770s, but compared with the wall behind me and the stairs that feed from this room, where one of the walls is about 1360, and yeah, that's what we consider pretty old here. So we don't know why they were filled in, we don't know anything about it. All I can say is that they were. We opened them up. By the way, there was no echo. Now, some people listening to this will say, why couldn't you hear an echo? But there was a double layer of wood on the floor, and it was very tightly sealed, as was the airing cupboard. So consequently, you couldn't tell. And at the back you couldn't, it was just a wall. So it opened up, and then we started. And certainly I had a very long coat pulled out one day from me out here, when I was on my own here. But I was quite near where you're sitting, or rather you at home can see me, it's directly opposite me is where this happened. And my coat was pulled out, and I thought, oh, I've caught it on a nail with a cotton. You apply logic straight away, you think that's what's happening. And walked across the room, and then my coat went out again elsewhere. But I mean, not a bit, I mean, it went out. So I thought, well, I must be off. And I went and got my handbag, and I set off downstairs. And I remember vividly, it's very interesting, saying, don't let them see you're frightened. We're taught not to be a victim to the living when we walk, particularly women are taught. So I'm going down the stairs with my handbag, and I could hear the stairs moving behind me. And when I got to the front door, horror upon horror, I had locked myself in. So I then had to scramble in my handbag, which is the bag of Narnia. But eventually I found the keys, got out, locked up, and just laughed. And I thought, I'm exhausted. I'm just exhausted. Like, or if you get flu, you know, your bed cover can look like it's moving. I thought that's what's happened. I mean, because I was doing 60 to 80 hours a week commonly, and I was completely alone, however. So as I drove off, there's a thick mist gathering here at the castle. Now, we get that naturally sometimes because we have the River Dove just below, 150 foot up, and in certain weather conditions, the mist can kind of blow up and lays. It's wonderful, you kick it about. So I still think that a very large number of the things that happen here are natural, through the weather or shift in the building. One day we had things flying off the gift shop in the day, and I got people to go and stand outside because I didn't know what was happening. And actually it was an earthquake, believe it or not, that struck one side of the building. And it had affected it substantially.
Well, our normal senses are what we see, what we hear, what we feel, what we taste. Something paranormal is something that can be seen and felt outside of those senses. And when a lot of people see the same thing or feel the same thing, then that is evidence of something that is paranormal. If somebody hears the same sound, but there's no sound coming from a radio or a TV, for example, but they're hearing somebody talking, and say 3 other people in the room can hear that voice as well, well, that's paranormal. We're using our sixth sense, the sense of clairaudience, and there are many clairs. There's clairsentient, which is feeling, clairaudient, hearing, as I just mentioned, clairvoyant, which is seeing with the third eye. So you're not seeing something that you can tangibly, physically touch, but you're seeing something that is within your mind, so to speak, but other people can be seeing it too. So there's evidence of a group of people seeing the same thing.
But then we started with a child, a little girl in the bedroom, people going in there and saying, I'm sure there's a ghost of a little girl in there. And what was interesting, this was way before the internet. As soon as you've got the internet, you've had it, haven't you? Because people are writing stuff and other people are experiencing it, they want to experience it. But the same name, interestingly, kept coming up, Ellie, Eleanor, Ellie. And that must have come up, seriously, about 9 times out of 10. And people saw this figure darting across the room, or they were aware of a kind of pulse of light moving. Blue lights, I've seen those too. I've seen blue lights too. I fetched this for university people who had a look at it, and they said it's very high, static, but it comes now and again, not all the time, which in itself is interesting. I'm interested in the blue lights. For those of you of the Christian faith will know that blue lights appeared above the apostles in the upper room, the Holy Spirit, and they spoke in voices and tongues. And this blue light seen in here. Occasionally we have a red light appear, and it looks like the end of a cigarette, and when that appears, we go. Something very unpleasant linked with that. We don't know what it is, but we go. And I've certainly sent staff home before now when the atmosphere's become so gripping. You think, well, is it mass hysteria? People just being silly? No. And then one night when I was sitting in the office in the early days, women running a place like this would not be what you call common. I was in the office and suddenly I screamed out because something had gripped me here, not on the breast, just above it, just gripped me really hard, and I brushed it away. And when just my secretary was with me, when I looked inside my blouse, there were fingerprints or marked red lines. And she saw it. And I said, have I imagined that? But subsequently you do think, well, is it a muscle spasm, or, is it my own hand that caused the mark? So you fight it, and I think it's appropriate to fight it. Otherwise it wouldn't work here. Brand new staff, brand new people get a growling sound. I don't tell them, imagine they'll know now, and I don't tell them because I want them to have their own experiences, and then we can explain what's going on, because sometimes with people, if you tell them, then they get it. I don't mean they're lying necessarily, but imagination's a terrific thing. And you get... What was that? Now be with me and experience it. What I want you to do is have an open mind. I'm going to close this door, and I want you to put out your left or right hand for me. Down a bit. She looks far straight away. Yeah, that fireplace is blocked. We have heating on in here. Got it straight away? Have you got it straight away? Any tingling in your fingers? Legs? Tingling? Straight away. That's not cramp. Right, you're getting it now. Just curve your hand a little bit. Ellie. Ellie, will you come? Ellie. Sometimes people can feel something there, but I'll also say, this is the anniversary of Mary, Queen of Scots' death, and she knew this room. If you're here, Your Grace, you are welcome.
You know you are.
Any other force here? You're here, declare yourself.
I want you to watch over there. Can you got any movement there? It might be just tiredness, but my eyes. Anybody got anything around them? It's very clear, isn't it? Temperature's much lower. Yes, definitely some energy here. It's yeah. But there's a room up there. It's warm. Is anybody here? Give us a sign if you can. Stand guard. Spirit, stand guard over us. If there's any darkness, step back. I'm getting quite wobbly myself.
It can be dangerous to open up to paranormal activity because, in my opinion, I think that playing around with the Ouija board can be dangerous because it's like getting in a car and having had no driving lessons. You have no idea of the vehicle that you're controlling. And so when you develop with a spiritual teacher, then you're learning a process very, very carefully and very slowly, allowing you to open up, opening up your aura, opening up your chakras, and learning to control your vehicle in a different realm, in a different state. A demon is not human, generally. Well, I suppose you could be demonic and be human, actually, if you're so tormented that you become demonic.
I'll speak in this room, particularly as Mary Queen of Scots in full costume, the lights will pulse, but only on one side of the room sometimes. But they're on the same connection. It's not separate. It's not a separate system. And all of this constant arrangement of, it's almost like there are certain times of the year when it's very, very much more active. It's like when the big battles are. You see, in August we get terribly busy. Just before Christmas we get terribly busy. When I say busy, I mean ghosts. But this little girl, has a tremendous number of people have experienced her. And then I get people to put the hand out. Now, I do get people to turn the lights out in there, not to frighten them, but because when you are in the dark, your other senses become very much more active. So it enables smell or touch or awareness of somebody near because the body's on alert, if you like.
You can go into forest and there can be a beautiful feeling in the forest, and then you can get to a point of a forest and you think, oh, I don't like this here. And maybe because something tragic happened there, or it could be because that particular land is filled with historical battle. Yeah, absolutely. Places hold the resonance of, happiness and of tragedy. And if you're sensitive enough, clairsentient or empathic, then absolutely you can pick up the energy, you can hear it, you can feel it, it's tangible.
And I would like to say at this point, no, we don't set things up here. If we did, what's the point? So we've had dowsers here, and we had a lot that were linked with Derby University just before we did a massive dig, and they claimed that there is remains in an S shape of a child or a small person in the wall without knowing the story about Ellie. So this figure darting about is seen. When I've been Mary Queen of Scots as well, it's like something's come and looked at me. You get that sensation because the dress is extremely accurate, the gown that I wear. And there is some footage of me talking as Mary, and you see a white light seem to come out of me and around, dancing around, and then goes into the back of the fireplace beside me. Well, the reason that's interesting is because we, after that was filmed, looked in the back of the fireplace because quite clearly it's too shallow. forgot completely about this footage of this white light, and sure enough, where it went in, there's a space at the back, it's always telling us. And it's lined with cream stones, about that big, and we didn't know it was there.
Historical places will be filled with the energy of those that resided there in the past, and within the objects that belong in that home, especially jewellery. There's what we call psychometry, when you take a watch or a ring or a necklace and you can intuit, you can tune in, again psychically or on a mediumistic level, into the energy that's being held within the object, and you can read from that, and you can get a whole load of information, like who owned that watch, their personality, what was going on at the time when they bought that watch. Let's say, it could have been in the 1940s, or it could have been during a wedding or a celebration. So yes, definitely objects hold a resonance and an ability to hold on to memories, history.
Make a noise for us. So there are hints all the time. If there's going to be trouble here, the castle lets you know. If there's going to be a burglary or something like that, you can certainly know about it. Not that they're common now, we can't move cameras and security now, but if there was going to be an attempt or any difficulty like that, we certainly knew about it. I did have a man one day in here in front of 30 people who suddenly started speaking Latin. He said there was a wolf at the walls of the town. And I came out to him as Mary, and he said, "Venez pas ma reine, vous allez grand votre Rome," in French. He said, "You're not my queen, you're the great cow of Rome." It was really quite risky. And I got him on all fours on the floor in the end, because he was going to hit me. And he was a fake. Now, I'm telling you this because he'd learnt all this off by heart. He wanted to be on telly. And one of the great crises is you can get that as well. But in the middle of all of it, there's not much really denying that there is something, and we're drawn to it. Some people are on Classic FM, and some are on, Netflix. Some people are caught up with one particular wavelength, and at particular times of health, mental health, women close to menstruation, I've noticed, are particularly active with spotting things and seeing things. It's as if the physical body becomes weakened and the spiritual body wakes. These are all theories, but some people, we've had 30 psychologists in here one night. One went into that room, making people think about ghosts. It's really interesting, the people of the past, she was the one out to come out. I've had people in there who are absolute non-believers, think it's rubbish, but come with the girlfriend, like coming to the castle, think it's a nice experience, and some get stuff, and some really get things. So we've had this history of ghosts wandering around, but one day when I was Mary in here, and I had a large school group in, which happily this was being filmed because Ofsted were filming their outside visits, and these children were about 8, 9. And I was on the throne talking, and at the end, 2 children in the middle, 2 boys, at the same moment went, "Where's the little boy gone?" So I said, "What little boy?" And the teacher came forward and I went, "What little boy?" She said, "Here, with a skirt on and a white top and short hair." He was laughing at you, had his arms out. The other went, "Yes," and he was this, this and this. They were clearly telling the same tale, the same vision they'd seen at the same time. And I looked across at one of the teachers who went, "They're not lying. They're not lying." I mean, they saw it. And I said, "Where did he come from?" "You saw him, he came up the stairs. And then he came and stood with you, but where's he gone now?" So there are those kind of moments, and you're very much aware and full of respect for the people who feel these things and see these things. I had a lawyer in one night who swore blind I'd got fairy lights round me. I definitely didn't have fairy lights, and I made him look. And he found that quite unnerving. He couldn't believe his logic was defeated by this. He went outside and rang his mother, which made me laugh. There's not one of us that hasn't laid someone in the ground that hasn't hoped and prayed there's another life. And a bit of you say, when you part with someone through death, family, people you love, it can't be it. The sense of disbelief is overwhelming. And for a lot of people, it isn't it. They believe there's another life, people with faith. And this place, every now and again, seems to pull forward these individuals who step through the door. We've always thought in this country, or that's been where it really comes from, that the Halloween business is really All Hallows Eve, of course, All Saints' Day, the night before, that the veil between the living and the dead was its thinnest. And to make people in purgatory feel more comfortable, we used to light fires for them, you know, outside our houses and on the village greens, so that they could look through the veil of purgatory and see the fires and be comforted. All these practices, you see, and in many cultures in the world, there are days of the dead when ancestors are respected. People here who lived and loved and had their babies, some were kings, some were queens. I think, are we not equal in the sight of God? So maybe it's servants as well that we see here. What I do know is the nasty piece of work I discussed with you earlier with the red light, he's vicious. People get pushed about a bit with him. And he's not above touching women, not above whispering in the loo.
I believe that we are intrinsically seekers. I think that's part of the human condition, to want to learn, to receive knowledge, to evolve. And we can only do that by seeking, looking. So I think it's intrinsically in many of us, and that's why we are searching.
Keep looking. Ellie, come and play, Ellie. It's getting colder and colder and colder, I think. Do you feel anything? Some people watching this at home may see things in the room. People often do. Ellie. Copy me. Copy me. Make a noise for us. Sometimes we get that strange. I think that's all we'll get. But it's definitely colder, there's definitely vibrations on my hands. So it's still in here, but still the temperature's distinctive. At night, when you're in here, and you see that's the way Castle used to look before Cromwell destroyed it. What a tragedy. This beautiful place. It reminds me of Narnia, you know, it's wonderful. All pulled down by Act of Parliament. No wonder there's anger here. But there's also joy and love for the people that have lived here. Sometimes people see a figure here, sitting down. Stairs are something that ghosts seem to be interested in. We seem to be concerned about people crossing on the stairs. In my end is my beginning, says Mary, Queen of Scots. And some people think that in this room there is still evidence of another life, a new beginning. Put your hand out a little for me. Just one. I might need the other one. Anything? Cold. How's your head? Okay, no pain. Have you? Like, put your hand forward a little that way around.
you want to stand near me? Yeah. Ellie. Can you just hold this lady gently? Hold her hand a little. If you relax your hand a little bit. Just gently, look, pretty. Come on. Did you do that? Did you see that? Pulled? Or, yeah, or something's happening with you. Have you had anything like this before? You're a bit fey, probably. That's a compliment. There's definitely something happening here now. It's gone. And that's what's strange. You see the hero, it's not, you see. It's gone. So when she says she felt it, she felt it. And we've had so many intellectuals in here, so many people who would apply strong logic who say, no, there's something here, I've never seen anything like it. Do you like it? Like going through the back of the wardrobe, isn't it? But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's very dark in here. I don't mean dark in that sense. I mean you feel there's a presence which you really need to get away from. Don't think these places are just all full of knights in armour. There were some very dark people here too. Of both sexes. I think it's bitterly cold. And yet this radiator is actually hot. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be cold, that is. Have hope in your hearts, just in case. Some people come here, spend a whole lifetime and get something here. And others who've been once and experienced something are saddened they can't get it again. But it's not fake, you know, it's the real thing. People really feel it. You should be here in the dark.
Copy me.